This example, we're going to be creating a formula within Sheets. So it's going to get the average of the above the threshold numbers coming in within the array range. So this is where we're using the range. So these are strings. They're going to be converted into an array with numbers. We're going to add them together, check which values are going to be over the threshold, add those together, and then divide it by the number of results that are being returned back. If we have a threshold number of above what we have for any of the values in the range, it will just return back 0. And it will update using the formulas that we've done in the calculation of the app script. So that's all coming up in this lesson. Log into your Google account, go to your Google Drive, create a brand new sheet, open up the sheet, and we'll just give it a name. So just call it tester1. We're going to add some data into the sheet as well. And then we want to open up the app script editor. So app script editor is under extensions, app script, and that's going to open up the editor. And then give this one a name as well. I'm going to have the same name as the Google sheet and just give it a rename. So that's going to give that sheet within my Google Drive, and if I do want to access the tester, I can always access it through my drive. It's just created on the root of my drive, and then from the Google Sheet, because it's going to be a bound script, I'm able to access and open up the Google Apps Script editor as well. This is going to be the sample data that we're going to be using, so we need a range, and this is a range of the values, and then the threshold is going to be the number that we're going to be adjusting. So we're going to be looking to add together and get an average of the numbers. So in this case, it's going to be starting at the threshold of 3, so it's going to take 3, 4, 5, and 6, add them together and divide it by 4. So that should produce an output of 4. In this case, this range is going to start at 25, where the threshold. So that's going to include 30, 40, and 50. So it's going to add those together, get a total of 120, and divide it by 3, because there's 3 numbers that are included in there, and it will provide the output within C. So we want to create a value above the average threshold, and that's the function that we're going to be creating. So it's going to take in the range and then output the value using the threshold as the minimum value. So go create the function and give the function a name. So I'll call it average above threshold. So what this will do is it's going to take in the 2 parameters, the first one being the range and the second one being the threshold value. And as we can see, we've got them labeled here in the first column. And I'll just make that a little bit bigger so it's easier to read. So selecting out some starting values, and I'm going to start with the value for sum, and I'm using let because sum is going to be changing, and as well we're going to create another variable, and this is going to be using count, and this is also starting at 0, and as we increment through the range, we're going to update those values. So let's test it out as a formula, and for the formula we're going to return a value, and we're going to take the range and return back the length of the range. So select the function name in AppScript, and then go to the cell that you want to use the function in, do the equal sign and then the function name, and let's enter in the parameters that we want within the function. So first one is range, and then we comma separate it and we get the threshold. Press the enter, and that will load. So that will return back a length of 16. So that means that there's 16 characters that it's seeing within. So it's taking it as a string value. It's not taking it as an array. So we want to convert the string to an array. And here we can use the split method in order to do that. So let's update the value for the range and set it up as an array. So we're going to be taking the range itself, and we want to split the range and split it using the comma separation, and then output the length of the array. So save that and then go back to here, press enter again, and so now we're getting a value of 6. Let's make sure that it is working properly. So this one does have 5, so even if we added in and if we added another number within that format, it would still take it in as a numeric value. We can also just make sure as we're going through there, we can loop through those items. I also like to apply the trim. So the trim will remove out any additional white space after that. So just apply the trim, and then you can chain together the other value there. And we'll do a forEach loop. So now that we've got an array, and returning back the value of each one of those items. So we want to increment count plus 1. And then we also want to take the sum and equal it to itself, so add in whatever we've got for the value. And then returning back the value, that we're going to take the sum divided by the count. So that will give us an average of all of the values within the cells. So it's just recalculating that. Result was not a number. So we want to make sure each one of these values is going to be a number. So using the parse integer method, wrap it around the value that's coming from the array. So adding in to the sum, make sure that we're adding the number. So that will give us the average. So in this case, it's 4 is the average. Here it's 36, there's 12.5, 250. So we're calculating out the averages. So that's exactly what we want. And we want to add in one more option here, because this is where we want to incorporate the threshold into the calculation. So we need to have a condition as we're iterating through to see if the value of the number should be included into the sum. So we'll take the value of number and checking to see if it's greater than or equal to whatever we've got for the threshold. And only if it is, then we're going to add those values in. So update the calculation with the new condition. And now let's see what we've got for the results. So we are getting different numbers here. This one is throwing an error array. So that's why it's returning back just that null number, because we can't divide it by a 0. So creating another variable, call it total. And this is going to be a ternary operator where we're going to check to see if count is, so if count is equal to 0, otherwise we turn back the value of sum divided by count. So even if we have a threshold of 500, it's going to still return back a value of 0 because we don't have anything that's matching that threshold. You can also simplify this by adding in the ternary operator directly within the return statement. So that will remove back one of the statements there from the function and still produce the same result. So in this case, if we update this to be 40, it's going to just return back 0 because it doesn't have the thresholds. If we update any of the threshold numbers, it's going to return back the new calculated result using the range values, and it's counting these as arrays, taking the threshold and then outputting the result.